welcome to the Hill Riders reading series. I really thank you guys for being here. Hill Riders started as a get together in Frankfurt and Lexington for our writing communities, but now it's kind of ventured into showcasing these awesome authors who are really kind of specified in the Appalachian region, but not always. And talking about how their work is in conversation with one another, even though we may not see it when we read two separate Kentucky author, well, not Kentucky authors, actually, both of these authors are from different areas, but um, how does this work generate from all of us about the same places and sometimes the same subjects, and how do we deviate and also work with poetic form to kind of make sense of the world around us specifically. So those are kind of like some big ideas of Hill Riders, but really all it is getting you guys together and celebrating what we've created. Love to introduce Patsy Kisner. Her most recent poetry collection, Until the Surface Breaks, is now out through Main Street Rag. Her work explores life's duplicity, how a single moment can be both joyous and grief-filled. Rooted by her environment, Patsy demonstrates keen control over word choice and syntax. These brilliant poems are brief snapshots jammed packed with meaning. Her poems have appeared in journals such as Untelling, Still, the Journal, Appalachian Journal, among many others. She's been featured in the Red Moon Anthology, the Women Speaks anthologies, and Troublesome Rising, A Thousand Year Flood in Eastern Kentucky. You can find her other releases, Last Days of an Old Dog, and a poetry chapbook, Inside the Horse's Eye, through Finishing Line Press, by going to her really beautiful website, patsykisner.com. On her website, she says that her and her husband Phil live on a farm in West Virginia, and they are the parents of Mary, who is now deceased, and Maria, who lives with her family nearby. Let's just give a round of applause to Patsy Kisner here. Welcome.
Thank you. Um, I have four poems from Until the Surface Breaks to read to you all tonight. And the first one is it's the first poem in the book, and it kind of just sets the tone for some of the topics that I'm going to talk about. The book is broken up into three sections. The first section talks about the loss of my daughter. The second one talks about the farm, which is, and I'm going to pull most of the poems I read from each night from that section. And the third section is what I call inheritance, and it's more about like what we learn from those who have gone before, whether we've even had the opportunity to meet them in this lifetime or not. So, the first poem is just it's at the beginning of these sections, and it's called After Death. The wind sweeps the woods, breaks free the broken branches, while inside the barn, a new calf wobbles to its feet. At the garden, sugar snaps wait for me to pick, each perfect pea inside the pods, an assurance I can keep. And again, that is the very first poem. And then I've picked three more poems that I want to read to you tonight, and they are all from the section called The Farm. And I feel like I have learned so very much from living on a farm. Um, and it has touched me in a lot of ways. And as you could, a lot of the poems in this section represent how the farm is also a form of church for me too. And I discuss prayer, you know, baptism, humility, revelation, all those things in subtle ways in this section as well. And the next poem I'm going to read is it's the first poem in the series, and it's titled The Farm. Something's always needing feeding. Beaks and snouts, muzzles with sturdy molars used for grinding grain. Some days I feel like I'm breaking off pieces of my own self, giving too much of me away. At dark, I open books, read the cravings my loves have sent to me on paper. I study the lines, the perfect diction, the turn of a word in ways I could not think. I read until I'm full, then add ink to my own pages. In the morning, I'll start over, filling all those mouths with one type of seed or another.
And Patsy, I love to stop halfway through these
Sure.
poems that you're reading, and I just would love to talk about that poem and just your process in general. Um, One thing that I notice about your work that I see in other authors as well. I'm studying Georgia Lyon right now, and she has this ability to say a lot in a small amount of space, and also to use enjambment, move into that second line. Um, Quite frequently, but very intentionally. So
Mhm.
that's what I see happening in your work. And I also see a use of alliteration that is really amazing. Just this idea of the beaks needing feeding, beaks and snouts. There's like a rhythm to this that is like none other, in my opinion. So I would love to know, where did this poem start? What line was the first line, if you can remember, or what was the initial idea when you got this inspiration?
Um, Literally how something's always needing feeding on a farm, but it's also too how the routine of the farm
Hmm.
is saving grace as well too. Um, and I do I I'm very focused at trying to make my poems as minimal as I can. Um, that's just the way, I guess, when I just first started to write poetry, it's just where I found myself. Um, I do try to pay attention to elements of sound, as you said. And I kind of break my poems, like how I determine where the line breaks are going to be. I mean, when I first started writing, I really struggled with line breaks.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, what's better? What's best? And then I just finally settled on I'm going to break the line where I think I want the pause to be as I read it.
Yeah.
And I let that be a big part of my guide as into how I choose to as again line breaks, but also with stanzas too, where I think there needs to be a break. And it's interesting that you should mention Georgella Lyon because she was one of my poetry teachers at Heinemann. It was during the pandemic and it was virtual.
That's
And
awesome.
and when we did our one-on-one critique, one of the first things she said to me was she said, "Well, I like your poems, but we need to talk about shape." And she said we need to look at like how they look on the page. And she said because I tended to just to sort of keep going without many stanza breaks and stuff. And she said she showed me how to look at my work and see where the natural breaks occur. And
Yeah.
it was just I learned so much from her. Um, I am grateful for having that opportunity, but I have to credit her with teaching me a lot about how to think about how my poems look on the page and how they started to look. My newer poems look different from my earlier poems because I think, I've been able to have a lot of help and input on how they look.
Yeah. I think that we're always expanding as poets. I think sometimes we get into these mindsets of, well, this is how my poetry looks, or I'm never going to be this person, but it's a learning experience being a writer overall.
Mhm.
I love that you have that relationship with her, and what a great mentor to have. Um, I'm going to let you keep going, but I do want to bring up what's going on in the chat here. The ending words of each line are so strong. I absolutely agree. And one thing that I noticed is like, just even in this first break, we won't get too deep into it, but some
Mhm.
days I feel like I'm breaking off pieces of my own self, giving too much of me away. One thing I'm realizing, and this may be simple, but each line is its own poem in your poetry. Um, and I don't know, like there's because there's so much use of meaningful like silence. I think that we can delve deeper with you into this like perspective and realm. So it's really, really great. Okay, I'm gonna shut up and let you get to the next one.
Okay. The next one is called At the Crossing. And my horses, my relationship with horses has been very important to me in my life, and my work always has horses in it. And th this is one of my little personal favorites of my own work because of just what the horses have taught me. And this is called At the Crossing. I watch as the sting of rising heat sends the horses galloping toward the barn. Nostrils wide, manes slashing the hanging vapor. Their legs spin the wild force of motion, and when they part the creek, water washes me.
Mm, beautiful.
And I also wanted to include the poem where I pulled the title for the collection from. And this poem had also appeared in Appalachian Journal, and it's called At the Creek. A still pool mirrors trees, drooping willows and white-barked sycamores. I forget for a moment that what's beneath the water still moves until the surface breaks and a wilderness leaps out like a fish.
Beautiful. And I know these are the ones that you brought up, but I'm so glad that you brought these poems to us because these were the ones I wanted to talk to you about. So before we'll get deeper into discussing your work, but before we move forward, um, I don't know if anyone can see this, but the cover of her work, got a really dark screen here, is that lake. So at the creek is based on that. So is this a space on your, I don't know, I know this is an illustration, but is this somewhere on your farm? Um,
No, no, that is just a photo that I found through Shutterstock,
Beautiful.
actually, that I just thought was um I mean, I had some photos of my own, but I'm not real good with taking my own photos, and I just didn't think they were of a caliber to try to use my own. Um, and I just, as I was searching and looking at random photos, I just thought, this is exactly what I want. I mean,
Yeah,
um, it most represented what I experience here in our little area, I thought, or as close
yeah.
to it as I could come.
I thought it was really interesting to see how it's interesting to me how our minds work with poems and color and image. Because when I read your work, especially this collection, I feel like we're in a damp, dark, I mean, sometimes beautifully lit, but it's a quiet space and it's a space of healing. The way that you have separated this out in what's occurred to you to your family, but then also the going back to your home and the farm and feeling that. I don't know, there's a love generated from that farm and that land that I think allowed you, and I don't want to speak for you, but allowed you to find yourself again and to become, you know, I don't know,
Mhm.
alive again as well. When someone dies, I think that part of us dies with them. And to watch your farm bloom regardless is
Yeah.
something that I see over and over again in this work. It's really beautiful. So before we move on to, because I have lots of questions for you, but before we move on, I just want to ask you at the creek, um, what made you choose this poem? What made you choose Until the Surface Breaks? What does that title mean to you?
Um, I think that anytime you're dealing with hardships, with loss, um, I think sometimes, I guess a metaphor is you do sometimes feel like you're just like you're trapped beneath the surface. You're trapped beneath the water, and it's stifling at times. And I think, I mean, I wondered like, am I ever going to break th free and through from this, from all that emotion? And I guess that's why to me, I thought that that poem needed to be where the title came from because it is about the surface does break. There is relief.
Yeah.
So,
And before there's relief, it does feel like you're drowning in that love and that water, that
mhm,
grief.
mhm,
Well, beautiful work overall and a beautiful dedication to your daughter, who I'd love to know more about as well. So I have some questions about that too. But I just want to check the chat one more time because we got people who really love what we're talking about here. Um, and okay, and when they part the creek, yeah, wilderness leaps out like a fish. Yeah, that is an amazing ending. A light touch of grace in these. I think that's a really good way to explain that, Manny. It's just as a poet who goes on and on and on, I think that what I'm seeing in my studies of George Ellen, and what I'm seeing in you is this idea of poetry has a silence to it. And the only way you can get to that silence and that level of healing and that level of seeing yourself in your own work is by cutting away at the extra fat that you don't need.
mhm.
And it makes us all pause in these poems instead of just being kind of inundated with it. So thank you so much for reading for us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me read.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump over here to Jan LaPerle. But we will get back. If you have questions for Patsy, I would love to hear your guys' questions as soon as we get into our Q&A section, which is coming up very soon. Jan LaPerle lives outside of Fort Knox, Kentucky, with her husband Clay Matthews and daughter Winnie. She has published a book of poetry, It Would Be Quiet, Prime Mincer Press, 2013, and an e-chap of flash fiction, which is called Hush by Sundress Publications in 2012, a story in verse. A Pretty Place to Mourn, Blaze Box 2014, and several other stories and poems. In 2014, she won an individual artist grant from the Tennessee Arts Commission. She's also a former sergeant in the military here. I want to say it right. First class in the U.S. Army and currently teaches high school. Um, Congratulations on your retirement and your new position. Please welcome Jan LaPerle.
I can't tell if. Okay. Hi. Thank you so much, Samantha, for doing this. And it's so nice to see some familiar faces.
It is nice to be with you as well because I feel for some reason I thought you lived out of state because I was like I never get to see Jan LaPerle, but life is just so busy. So it's good to see you.
It is so busy. And teaching high school, it's crazy. um,
Uh,
so I had a few poems I was going to read, and then as I was listening to Patsy, I was like, "Oh, this one might speak to that one," and I was kind of scrambling. So Um, I guess it doesn't matter to you all, but I'm going to read from Maybe the Land Sings Back. I'm going to read a few poems and then maybe a few new ones. Cupboard. One day I decide I'll do something good for people, but I forget. Then I nap. My daughter wants to make lemon cakes, so we do that. I stand on the stool and begin this great hunt for poppy seeds. Hours pass and I'm on my tiptoes. I stop searching for a minute to listen to the wind, the branches snapping. My daughter ran off again to her swing tied to the branch of the tree she climbs, the tree run through with electric wires, in the yard she flies her kite in. She flies it high as the cell tower, her dragon kite breathing fire, her dragon kite headed in a nosedive straight into the electric lines. I can't do anything about anything. I'm trapped in the cupboard, forgetting what I'm searching for. I dust the spice tops. They go on forever. My hair too tight in its bobby pins. Here as good as any place to pray.
And Jan, before you move on from this amazing poem, because I'm bad to go, hold on, no, let's talk about that. Um, this is one of my favorite poems. I've read your book many times. You give me like you give Ada Limon vibes in the best. Like, there's no bad way to give Ada Limon vibes, but there's always two things happening in your poems, and it's always this surface of we're doing something that's normal, but inside, there's a lot more occurring in my brain. Like, I feel like one thing that I see in both of your works, and the reason I paired you together, is that you welcome the reader into your inner dialogue, into this like space with you. Like, I feel like I'm also making the cookies or making the cake with you guys by the end of this. Um, for this poem, I just wanted to ask the same question. What was the first line that came to you for this poem? Were you actually making a lemon cake, or do you remember the inspiration there?
Um, I don't have any idea. It's been a long time since I wrote this poem. I would say, regardless, most of my inspiration is from letter writing. I do a lot of letter writing. In fact, one of my um, letter writing friends, Camilla, is in the audience. So I think maybe what you said, Samantha, about inviting a reader in is maybe because I'm so conscious of having a really clear audience when I'm writing. So maybe that kind of answers it. Hi, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah, no, it really does, and I promise I won't keep pausing you here. But
No, it's
I
nice
wanted
because it feels a little odd sometimes in a virtual reading to just read to the screen. So it's
it
nice.
does. And if you really want to be professional about it, we're not even supposed to stop you and clap. We're just supposed to be like, I always feel so awkward in real poetry readings because you're just supposed to let people tell us everything they've ever felt, and we're over here like, until the end we have that little clap. So, okay, I'm gonna let you keep going, but I just wanted to tell you my favorite line in this. I can't do anything about anything, and you right after that take us and you're trapped in that cupboard, and I was like, I'm trapped in the cupboard too. So glad to be in the cupboard with you, and I'll
Yeah,
let you keep
I,
working.
I feel like I'm always trapped in the cupboard. Um, yeah, this one's kind of similar. So, dragon. So this, I wrote this after um, I went to a county fair with my daughter and my husband, and my daughter was, I think, in second grade, and her best friend, we ran into her at the fair, and her best friend wanted her to go on the Ferris wheel with her. And I was like, no, we're going to go do bumper cars. I'm not even sure why I said no. But anyway, her friend ended up, um, well, the Ferris wheel, they were sitting in these cups, and the cups actually caught onto the framework of the Ferris wheel, and it like dumped the little girl and her sister out of the teacup from the top. It was so terrible. The girl was okay, but um, we didn't know what had happened to her for several weeks, so it was really scary, and it was really scary to think that my daughter, um, you know, could have been in there with her. So this is where this poem comes from. Dragon. Our neighbors are so close and looking, always looking, and here I am in a tank top again, no bra, shoveling poop again, and crying about a little girl who is my little girl's friend. The little girl fell from the Ferris wheel. I searched the news frantically, but nothing. I've been crying and my eyes hurt, the sunlight hurts, and the neighbors won't stop looking at me. And my wave is dumb and heavy. I want to put my arms to bed again like the old dogs they are. The little girl who fell from the Ferris wheel rode the little dragon roller coaster with my little girl a few minutes before she fell. I have a friend who does not have children. I do not want to see her today. I'm in the yard hanging my little girl's shirt from the line, the one, with the glow in the dark bones. The shirt's so old the bones are peeling off, and I try to pretend my fear is a wall that can protect her. But it's nothing, just a wall between me and some sort of joy I can see from here. I can almost wave to it, but my arms are heavy, too heavy today. I am scary with these eyes. My little girl, who asked me 3 times to ride the Ferris wheel, her face shining up at me, bright as a sunflower. Okay. And that's how the two of them looked, one behind the other in the seats of the dragon. She asked me, please, please, as the helicopters above us hauled the bodies away. When I drive across town, I can see the Ferris wheel rising up like some terrible mistake. Who am I to go to the store today, to buy milk today, when the flowers are here and the neighbors are watching and everything and everyone is looking at me like I'm supposed to know what to do?
Love that one. Can I pause you again?
Yeah.
I told myself that I was going to let you guys just read, but it's just not happening. Um, God, okay. So there's something about the way that you read where you travel me from one image to another. You get real close to the image, and then you connect it back to the feeling, the main theme of a feeling that you're experiencing. And I think where I'm doing my MFA, I'm starting to really think about like how do we move through these images. And I just wanted to bring up a couple lines. Like what I met with in this poem from the narrator is a feeling of also kind of hanging from that Ferris wheel. There's nothing you can do to help them. No bra, shoveling poop again, crying about a little girl who is my little girl's best friend. It's such a space. There's so much space between you and the problem, and as much shit as you shovel, it never gets you closer to it. So I think that was a really beautiful way. It's almost like I feel like I'm spinning sometimes when I'm reading your work because everything feels like it goes together in so many different ways. I don't have a question about this one, but I do want to just jump over to the chat one more time and see how everybody is experiencing your poetry. Here is as good as any place to pray. I had a family emergency, couldn't find the link. Okay, glad you're here. Absolutely. Love the idea of writing too. The idea that fear can protect us. That's interesting. Allison, I would love for you to unpack that idea if you want to before we move forward. The idea that fear that can protect us. You feel like unmuting? If not, it's okay.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. No, I just really identified with the fact actually that I think maybe not that fear can't protect us really. The idea that we want fear to be able to be a protector. And that was gonna come later about your relationship to the military and being prepared and if defense and this idea of preparedness plays any how that plays a role in your writing and this idea of fear if that comes up. I haven't read a lot of your writing, so I apologize, but I'm very, very, very interested. So that just struck me.
I think it's a really good question to ask, though. Especially as being a woman in the military for so long. Um, Before we move forward, let me see if I can spotlight you again. Um, what has that done for you? Because here's the thing I'm seeing with you is that you went from one scary thing to another scary thing, and you just keep on like killing it. In a lot of ways, they're both you have to protect yourself against that fear of leaning in to both of those careers. How do you feel before we move forward? How do you feel like your life in the military shows up in your poetry, or does it?
Oh, there's some big questions. Well,
Too big.
I I really feel like the military, I kept kind of kept it over here, and then my poetry and poetic sort of thinking over here, they felt really separate for me. I do have a few poems um, about the military, but not many. I don't know if maybe down the road, as I kind of reflect on it, it might come back to me, but it just didn't come up very often. So,
I think that's okay though, because it's like the things that are closest to us, you can't write about them. I feel like
hmm
when I was teaching high school, I wasn't writing poetry.
hmm
Like I wanted to. I was trying to teach other people how to do things. I was trying to move forward through those days. But I do see a diligence that exists. Just in your personality overall that I see pop up in how precise this poetry is. So we're gonna let you keep reading, but I just want to
Okay.
read this last comment. It says Jan's voice is part vulnerable, part fierce, and always protectively aware of how fragile the world is and our place within it. So we would love for you to read us some more.
Was that Jeff? I missed talking to Jeff. Okay. I'm gonna read something. I'm gonna read something new. I have a new manuscript that I've been sending out, and um, it's, I don't know, it feels a little kind of, I don't know the right word. Maybe it'll come to me. This poem is called Bright Sadness. In the crepe myrtle, outside the window, four baby mockingbirds nest. If you knock on the thin trunk, they rear their ugly little heads, beaks open toward the sky. They are purely instinct, little furry instincts with not much else about them. They make mothering seem so lonely, and it was at first, but not now. My daughter on her horse galloping through the cells of my heart in her little white stirrups. My mother-in-law was suffering heart trouble in December. She learned that if you take one cell from the heart, that one cell will have its own heartbeat. Stephen Hawking found that there is no tiniest part of nature. Rather, there are forces of light. Those who have crossed to the other side witness light in all of their cells and all the universe. We are all one. Our egos and fears and beliefs separate us. My mother-in-law learned too that sometimes that one cell taken from the heart will have a different beat than the others. Then the other cells will join that cell. That is what causes a heart attack. I'm telling you, the baby birds I'm telling the baby birds this. I'm telling you that modern physics can prove mathematically that an angel can travel here. I believe. I believe in the lovely orange light from the west through the window where I stood, folding my husband's black undershirts, catching little pockets of light in each one. I folded them just right. So each morning, when he goes to his drawer, he'll open the black shirt, and what will be there is light and love and warmth from the western sun, from wherever that western sun was born. Beautiful orange baby. I'm telling you, there will always be a light in the darkness. And sometimes I think it's actually reading a poem where you realize what it's doing. And sometimes I think I'm trying to pack too many things. You know, what Patsy said about simplicity in poetry and the beauty of that. And it's so hard for me to like just write something uh, really simple, but I love the simplicity of when it comes together, when images come together. So uh, I'm just going to read a poem. It's called This Thing Like That. When she was little, my daughter would pull a cotton ball from the bag and place it in the little yard of her hand, then shelter it with the roof of her other hand. She'd whisper into the windows, I love you. I'll keep you safe. If there ever were a happy cotton ball, like coming home, like pulling off new shoes at the end of the day, like sitting in my flowered chair beneath the window looking out and hearing it suddenly, almost too quick to catch, like a car passing, like wind.
I just want to say that I get what you're saying with the it's hard to write a short poem, but I believe that in in choosing you guys to I guess pair together in this, I wanted to show how, in my opinion, you're doing the same things at the same time in a different way. Like, I don't know. I can see a similarity there where I know that sometimes it feels like you're packing too much in one spot, but the same overwhelmed feeling I get about the world being this connected and being this messed up and being this overwhelming is the same feeling I get when I read Patsy's poetry too. Without this, I don't know, without the same amount of words. So I think that the feeling that poetry gives us uh, can echo the same sentiments in different ways. But beautiful work. Thank you both. You have
Jan, this is Manny.
Hi,
How you
Manny.
doing? How you doing? Um,
Pretty
you
good.
talked about letter writing and how the voice is it. I wanted to ask a question, it's real specific. Is the voice of your letters what turns out in your poetry? How does that work for you? I want to know how that actually works for you. Or is it that the subjects come out and become poems? Or is it the fact that you're writing to somebody when you say these poems makes it real personal? Because I can identify with that. What is it about letter
Um, I think there's something about letter writing. Um, I mean, the people that I write letters to, I feel very close to and connected to, um, even if I haven't seen them in years. Um, and sometimes my poems will be completely, um, you know, pieces of letters, maybe different letters, different people kind of pieced together. But I think in a lot of, especially my newer poems, there's a lot of like questioning. And I think the questions are like a direct question to whoever it is that I'm writing to.
I think feel like there's a safety that lives there, and I wonder how many of us in the audience could consider, writing in letter form, if not to someone we know, someone who's died, someone who, Patsy brought up our ancestors who are with us, even when we don't even know them. Uh, it's a really interesting way to get into your work through someone else, almost like a persona poem sometimes.
Yeah, and it's nice, to the process of writing a letter is so much freer and just kind of organic than, for me, than just sitting down and saying like, okay, I'm going to write a poem today. If it
Um,
comes, it comes. But I mean, I,
yeah, you don't have to force it.
right.
I love that. Well, I just have, before we get into, because I know you guys have some great prompts for us, I just want to jump back over to Patsy real quick and just ask her a few questions. You know, both of these books with these beautiful covers, I'm going to put the link in the chat before we leave. You guys can buy these straight from the publishers, but they're quick reads, but they have like really soft covers and they just fit so well in your day. So I hope that you do buy one of these books or both of them. But Until the Service Breaks just came out. And I wanted to ask you guys because you brought up the revision process and just your like how do you get a poem started? One of the things that I've written on my billions of questions that I always want to ask you, but then I only ask you like two. Um, Patsy, how do your first drafts resemble maybe what we see on the page? Or is there kind of like, because what I'm hearing between me personally and Jan is that we kind of write throughout the day and then we piece things together. That's how I do. I have like little pieces that I will pull together. Sometimes they come all at once, but it's mainly like me pulling things together and seeing where they fit. Patsy, do you write one of these poems straight out, or do you spend time with it? Do you put things together? How does your process look?
Um, well, my process is kind of random at the beginning. I mean, I always try to keep pretty journals and I try to not always every day, but I've had a pretty good routine of being, consistent with a journal where I just sit down and just whatever is in my head
Hmm.
comes out. It could be in a poem-like form, it could be an image, it could just be thoughts of something, and then I tend to just write in my journal for a while, and then sometimes I'll go back and I'll leaf through and I'll see if something has potential, and then I'll start pulling it out and typing the snippets that I think can become something into a Word document. And then and then as time then I'll fiddle with the Word document. You know what I mean? And that's where I do pruning or try to expand or try to make sense of it all. And I guess so I kind of start out without a plan and then I just sort of take what evolves and then see if there's some pieces from that that can become that maybe
Something else.
mix and gel with other pieces and see if they can become something together in a group or something like that. So,
I love that you are sticking to the writing every day in a journal too, or as much as you can.
mhm,
Um, I know a lot of us are in the Stafford challenge right now. And it's hard to write poetry every day. It's hard to write every day and not get sick of your own voice. It's when I write every day, I'm like, oh, everything I'm saying is just like, ugh.
mhm,
But there's an honesty there and there's an ability to be open with yourself and open with art that I feel like you have where it's like it might suck one day. It may not look like what I want it to look like when it first comes out, but it's safe in this place right here until I come back to it with new eyes. It's almost like the person that writes the thing down is the person who hates that the most. As soon as I write a line down, I'm like,
yep,
eh, throw the whole thing away, burn it. then you come back to a week later or something, and there's something there that blooms into something that you didn't even know you would even write to begin with. Um, Okay, I have one more question for Jan, but I want this is such a good transition into our generative workshop. So I'll come back to these questions and stop interrogating you guys. Me and Jan talked about our prompts today, and it's so funny she brought up the textbook that I'm using in Frank X. Walker's workshop right now. Um, I know a lot of you probably have this. It's The Poet's Companion, and it is a wonderful book that I would absolutely suggest. It's short chapters with a lot of prompts at the end, and a lot of examples of the type of poems that you could write. So it feels less of a craft book and more of an everyday kind of writing accessible kind of book to buy. So when you buy this, if you buy this, I treat it as if it is not a textbook. It really is a companion, in my opinion. But regardless, Jan brought up this chapter that I had not read yet, about our shadow selves. So I'm going to start with that prompt, just tell you about it. Our shadow selves, and also it says something about the collective shadow. So there's this experience that, and I'll let you talk more about this, but in Robert Bly calls the shadow the long bag, or the long bag we drag behind us, explaining that as we learn what others don't like or accept in us, we start bagging stuff. By the time we reach adulthood, Bly says there is only a thin slice of us left, and the rest is that long bag that we just carry around with us. And our writing is affected by that. So I'm just going to let her talk a little bit about what she got out of this chapter, and we'll look at the prompt that we've created.
So, the poem, it's a Jane Kenyon poem that he talks about in this chapter called "Having It Out with Melancholy," um, which I think is such a great title. And as I was, thinking about which poems to read and, a prompt for today, I was really thinking so much about melancholy. I just go through periods, especially in the winter, and it feels like it goes on for weeks where I just feel just like I'm carrying that bag around. It just feels so heavy, and I feel heavy. I feel completely like a complete different person at different times of my life, and um, which is really challenging, I think, for teaching, just having to like feel that and feel that heaviness, and also, try to engage a room full of students. So, what have been thinking about is just kind of embracing that, and just, realizing the students go through versions of that as well. And so Samantha had this great exercise that she talked about, and I'm not going to steal it here,
Feel it.
but in the chapter, it talks about being able to um, unflinchingly kind of address that bag that we carry around. And I think sometimes that can be the hardest thing. For me, it's like, oh, I don't want to be found out, or I don't want anyone to read this. So I love that the first prompt in that chapter is to just write something down, either your biggest secret right now, or something you're carrying, or a really strong fear that's preventing you, or holding you back right now, and just writing it and then destroying it, burning it, throwing it away, ripping it up.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly what we all need to be doing right now. There's such a stunted nature to our country, our society right now. that I don't know if we can access some parts of ourselves. So I think that like to handle our collective grief in a lot of ways, we have to get out of our own heads and start accessing the, you know, gross images, the things we don't want to say, the things that feel plain to say. Sometimes I'll look at something I've written and it's just not up to the standard. But whose standard is it not up to? It came out that way. It's naturally supposed to be that right now. Um, Before I read this prompt, you brought this up, and what we're talking about here, and it says it in this text. I just want to say they have trouble accessing that deeper self. And when they write, they're constantly cautiously thinking about, where am I going next? Is this the right grammar? Does it make sense? Is this too weird? Who's going to read this after it's been written? Such thoughts can stop the creative impulse dead in its tracks, and writing that results is likely to be tepid, perhaps pretty, but ultimately unsuccessful in conveying something. I don't care if you've been reading poetry for one day or if you've been reading it your whole life, people can smell the BS immediately in a poem if you're not bringing the truth, if you're not bringing your true self out. So I think that this is the only way that we can really access, different parts of poets that we could be. So today we'll do a real short generative write. It'll take about 10, maybe 15 minutes. We'll just kind of access something inside us for a little bit together, and we'll have a little bit of a open mic kind of style. If you want to read out, you can. If you don't have to as well. So it's just kind of if you write something, that's great. If not, one of the things we're here for is to open ourselves up to places and ways of writing that don't feel comfortable. They're not my normal waking up at a certain time and writing every day. Maybe what would come out in this moment when you're maybe not feeling up to you know, your poet self. So it says delve into the personal shadow or the collective shadow and thinking about, where we are as society in this exercise. Begin by writing something that's hard to admit, anything from a secret guilt to a global truth. Write about what's hard to look at. Once you have as much of it down as you can, highlight or bold, and this is something that I I came up with based on what Jan's saying, but highlight or bold one or two of the most important sentences in your admission. So you're going to write a paragraph, maybe you're going to write a poem, maybe it has form to it, but then I want you to go back and I want you to either highlight or bold one or two sentences that feel like the theme, the thesis of the piece. And then I want you to delete the rest. You can keep it somewhere else, but I want you to know that the rest is gone. And then I want you to begin that poem again with that truth as the first sentence or maybe the last. So something to consider with this prompt. The other prompt that we have available to you guys is Patsy's awesome prompts. And one of the reasons I brought you in today was because you're so connected to nature in a way that really calls to my Mary Oliver love. So I feel like a lot of your inspiration lives in this natural space where we can feel free to write. We can feel free to say, I'm not just a person, I'm an animal, I'm a soft animal. So could you tell us a little bit about your prompt today, Patsy?
Um, I think it pulls or it stems from so much of what I write is connected, like as you said, to nature in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And I just usually connect with if I'm trying to articulate an emotion or something, I try to find a way in nature that I can illustrate what it is I'm trying to express. So that's why with this prompt, I gave it two parts. And if you only just want to work on the first part tonight, that's fine. But I wanted you to think about, I mean, do you want me to read the prompt now
I
or
can read it for you. It doesn't matter. All to you.
go ahead, Sam?
So, yeah, thinking about that inner natural world if you were to create one. So the first part of this prompt, which I think is really brilliant, says close your eyes, take a virtual walk into a forest. And I kind of want to just take a moment, and because a lot of us may lean towards Jan's prompt or this prompt, but like take a moment with me real quick and let's try to do this. So you don't have to, but if you want to, just close your eyes for just a second. If you had your eyes closed and you're in this zone, where would you go? What would your virtual forest walk look like? So before we read the rest of this, what does your forest look like? Close your eyes and think about, are you in a place in Kentucky or somewhere in this region that you've seen before? What season is it? What colors do you see? And once you're there, imagine that there is a pine thicket and suddenly you decide you're going to pull back the bows. What do you find? Think about that. Like if there's something in the way and you pull it back, is it something that you might have expected to find there? And before you leave this image, before we move into our writing time, just take a moment and say, like, what does it smell like here? What do my feet feel? If I didn't have shoes on, what am I feeling? Am I cold? What do I smell? What do I hear? What kind of animals in my childhood existed? And through all of this, what's awakening for you? So if you want to, you can open your eyes if you were closing them with us and remember the colors that you found in that moment of just thinking about that imaginary land. It's hard to access imagination anymore the older we get. But I think that it's almost a duty for writers for us to, one, stay aware of the world around us because nobody else is looking. And two, to remember how connected we are to the land in order to be the poets and the writers that we really can be, because someone needs to reconnect us to our natural world. So part two of Patsy's awesome prompt says, take something you found under the pines and connect it to someone you love. So just thinking about that, in that moment, what was the imagery that stood out to me? And my mind went somewhere that felt safe. Is that place I've been before? Does that even remind me of someone that I've known before? It's a hard thing to think about connecting physical imagery to emotional self. But that's what we're talking about when it comes to both of these authors, is they're able to say, we're making lemon cake. I'm just going out to feed the animals, but I'm also experiencing more than I can verbalize as a human right now in these moments. So take something that you found somewhere in that image and find a way to connect it to someone you love, and maybe even write it in a letter form to access that deeper self. Okay, guys. So thank you to everybody who is with us today. This is a decent group, and this is the second month we've done this. But what Hill Riders is about is not about being the best poet in the world. It's about making time for, or even being a poet. It's about making time for writing in, real life, and really taking time. Even if you're not in a program about writing or you're a writing teacher, can we take a moment and recognize in each other some really interesting techniques and, things that we can take on in our own writing to expand who we are. So I know some people got a little bit down, and I'd love to offer you guys the opportunity to read some of that out. But before we do that, I just want to tell you a couple of different things, and I want to give you the option to say anything that you might want to say to either of the authors. So before I keep talking. Does anybody have any more questions or anything they would just like to, unmute or write in the chat to either Patsy or Jan? I know that we are all glad to have you guys here. So thank you for being a part of just taking the time out of your day to be a part of this.
Okay. With 4 months of trying each other, going on 3 months, and refusing to see me, I want to leave. I'm afraid it will kill me. Or maybe I don't think it can kill. The man in the Goodwill trying on women's clothing, falling for your laughter. A man throwing himself into traffic just to love you. He's dead. But his memories linger. His memories are here. Lover, there were notes of sandalwood and vanilla on your thin blue coat. I should buy her one as soon as Christmas comes. He said it so. If I'm honest, you've been the best mistake I've ever made. We were animals. An ancient love came between us when we went to say I love you. We were together in a bed. That's it.
Thanks, Manny. That was beautiful for a real quick write. Really beautiful. Russ, I know that you said that you would want to share, and then anybody else who's interested in, well, we got some really good stuff in the chat already. I'll read that out right after this. Go right ahead, Russ.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I am here at the edge, and I will walk inside the magic of white pine. Will the breeze arrive? Will I hear it whistle through? The magic of white pine, I will go further still, walking on the perfect surface of soft brown needles, so very quiet. And then there is the breeze, soft whisper above, tells me to turn, please, slightly, and look to the ground, rustle. And there they are in lovely swath, delicate and perfect, the pink slipper orchids. If I stay, will you remain? I know you will be gone when I return. That's me.
It's a lot of practice sometimes, but you never know what you're going to write. And I think both of those pieces were really honest pieces. These are the things that we're pulling out of this session together is, how do I get to the core, the bone of what I'm trying to say? How do I cut away the meat? How do I, distill these images and ask myself, what is the thing that I'm avoiding in my writing, which I think both of you guys hit on. Okay, we have Allison wrote an
I
amazing poem
think,
in
and
the
also
chat.
it's they are separate worlds. It's sort of like we want to keep them separate as sort of an escape. But they're also always poetry is always there to save you in some way or to heal you and to kind of as a safe haven. And we talked about like surfacing and resurfacing and I just think it was such a brilliant pairing, Sam, these two poets together. It was very obviously very inspirational, and I hate that word, but it was very yeah, very, very strong together. Yeah, I loved it. Fantastic.
But
Thank you.
thank you for being here. It's one of those shadow words. You didn't want to say inspiration, but I don't know. I feel like you needed to say that. Yeah, no, it's easy because like all of y'all are my favorite poets. So it's just like a birthday present to be able to do this, every time, every month. So I really appreciate you all being here. Before we head out, I want to read one more thing in the chat, and I also want to just talk about what you just said, something that's popping up for me when it comes to this idea. And Jan, we're talking so much about your military career. I'm sorry, but there is this level of like you have to put on a front when you're a teacher. You have to put on a front when you're an adult. You have to put on a level of humanness when you walk outside the door. And especially if you're in a military experience, which gives this level of control in your life, but also this like separation from yourself, like your true self. And I think with poetry, we are too close to ourselves to a point that it feels uncomfortable sometimes. But that's where real art comes from, is that getting as close as you can, and not being well mannered and perfectly poetically spoken. So I think that poetry gets us closer to being real humans every day, and it's the only thing that we can lean on in 2025. So I appreciate all of you being here. Roberta said one more thing. She said, wrote a couple pages of free write about how losing internet and phone for a couple of days. Oh my gosh, I'm being told by the service rep that my copper wire is obsolete. Made me examine how we are and are not connected in this society. Oh wow. Yeah. So pulling in those really specific images of copper, but as much as we think the internet's so huge and so big, every one of us, if our internet goes down, how would it affect your life, especially if you're on a farm, especially if you're, in a desolate area. Before we leave each other, I want to say thank you all for come back in March, and remember that, like there's a community that we need, that sometimes we're too tired to connect. Sometimes we're too tired to write. But I guess my question to you is, if you feel like it, show up with me once a month this year, and let's celebrate each other. Let's celebrate the words that we don't want to write down, and let's push them out until other people feel as human or as separated from humanness and as alien as we feel. I love all of you guys, and I love this community that we have. Please buy Jan and Patsy's books.